I'd like to call the September 14th meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission for the City of Post Falls to order. Will you please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everyone. Again, if you wish to speak, please make sure that you go in the back, fill out the proper form, and you can turn it in up front, and make sure your cell phones are on silent. We'll go ahead and start with the roll call.
Stephenson.
Here.
Harry. Here. Kimball.
Present.
Davis.
Here.
Ward.
Here.
Schlauhauer.
Here.
All right. Ceremonies, announcements, appointments, and presentations. Do we have anything tonight?
There's none.
Okay. Seeing none, do we have any amendments to the agenda?
There is not.
Okay. Commissioners, declaration of conflict, ex parte contact, site visits, anything to declare?
None. No. No, sir.
Okay. That moves us on to the consent calendar. Mr. Manley.
Yeah, item A is the minutes from the August 10th, 2021 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Item B is the reasoned decision from Boyd's Landing subdivision, file number SUBD 10, 2021. Item C is the reasoned decision for Blue Spruce Meadows subdivision, file number SUBD 11, 2021. Item D is the reasoned decision for Prairie Crossing subdivision, file number SUBD 12, 2021.
Okay, Commissioners, hopefully had a chance to take a look at everything. I would entertain a motion at this time.
I'd move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
I second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Call for a vote.
Schlauhauer.
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Davis.
Yes.
Kimball.
Yes.
Carey.
Yes.
Stephenson.
Yes.
Okay, next item, citizen issues. This section of the agenda is reserved for citizens wishing to address the commission on an issue that is not on the evening's agenda. Comments on issues that are for planned future meetings and agendas should be held for that meeting. And I would also just like to say that since we're in the middle of election and everything else, citizen issues need to pertain to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Is there any citizen issues this evening? Anyone wishing to speak? Okay, seeing none, that would bring us to unfinished or old business.
There's none.
Seeing none, that brings us to the first public hearing. So we'll go ahead and open the comp plan amendment. Mr. Manley to present.
Good evening, Commissioners. John Manley, Planning Manager, introducing Comp Plan Amendment, file number SPA 1, 2021. I'm gonna get this clicker to work here. There we go. So yes, the applicant for this is the Planning Division. We're asking a recommendation of approval for the requested amendment to the comprehensive plan. This is specifically as part of the low-density residential implementing zoning district of the comp plan. We're seeking to add the zoning district of R2 as part of that implementing zoning district. The reason for that is we just recently amended our zoning ordinance and removed multifamily as a permitted potential use in the R2. They're now a medium density, either a duplex or forms of single family homes via townhomes, cottage homes, tiny homes, or other single family homes in the R2, which lends itself to meeting the needs of the that low density future land use designation. So I've already stated that. In the comp plan, the public process, we did identify that we wanted to create more housing choices in Post Falls. I'll go into that in the next slides. Looking at that low density residential land use designation, the principal uses and character, you can see here that we're looking out for all types of housing within that, up to 8 dwelling units per acre. And densities may vary as appropriate to location. I kind of highlighted the main themes of that. So, I know you can't see it real good as far as the zoning, the legend on top, but that big sea of yellow you see everywhere, that's that low density designation in Post Falls. I will state most of it is already developed or is planned to be developed as part of either a PUD or other areas. You see North Place East, we just recently did a residential mixed for it. So that's going to be developed under that development agreement for that. You have a lot over out west that's going to be developed under the Montrose PUD. So really with the benefit of this proposed change is looking at infill opportunities. That's where more than likely would be used most, is more than likely south of pole line or centrally located closer to the core or other areas near our commercial areas, looking for some sort of infill development. And how this kind of lays out is you have our standard single family zoning districts. You have the SC3, which is your smart code, which is very typical or similar to the R1. And you also have your lower density, the R1S. The residential mix, that does allow for some multifamily, but through a development agreement, and that's where we would look at this, through a development agreement, and how do they meet that 8 dwelling units per acre. By removing that multifamily, like I said, it does allow this intermediate zoning district to kind of occur in between those. And partly how we're here is because of the cost of housing in Post Falls. I got this today off of Zillow. This is a one-day listing. This is off of Warm Springs. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. It's just shy of 1,900 square feet, and that's the list price at $630. You can see here on the right, you can't see it on the screen, but in 2017, this was on the market for $267. And in 2018, it was listed at $355. And then, so you can see that exponential growth in the housing price for this particular site. This is another one that I pulled off. This is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. I was looking for the other end of the spectrum. That was the upper end, the lower end of the spectrum. This is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, just shy of 1,600 square feet for $380. And you can see here, this is the curve of, since May of 2017, the increase in housing costs. This is a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, 1,000 square foot house for $340. And you can see that the rising price in housing at that rate too. So looking at the multifamily as the option, because we discussed as far as the comp plan amendment and other zoning updates that we really are getting a bunch of single family homes and multifamily apartment projects. We're not getting a lot of the stuff in the middle. Here's the current rental rates for like the residents. You're looking just 1,600 to 2,300. The Remington, you're at 1,250 to 1,800. Woodlands, same range. Similar with Crown Point. You have Park Villas over by Tullamore. That's a little higher. You can see that going up to 2,200 a month for your more bedrooms. And then Bell Cielo at 41, a fairly new one also. That's anywhere from about 1,000 to 1,600. So, you know, housing is expensive and it's becoming more and more expensive. So diversifying it can create the opportunity for affordability with different choices. This was the housing diversity sought with the zone change recently, the text amendment to Title 18. The R2 as presented and with it could provide the opportunity for this and these developments internally to the city or closer to it. Potentially with annexation, some could ask for R2 and do it also on the periphery. Routed the proposed change for this, adding R2 to the low density to these agencies, didn't receive any. That's kind of the gist of it. I don't have a lot more to expand on that. Is there any questions for me on why I'm presenting this or on the endeavor as a whole?
Questions?
Yeah, I guess I don't understand. I thought we had an R2 zoning.
We do have an R2 zone. It's very limited in scope, and I appreciate the question. So currently, Most of the R2 in the city of Post Falls is developed or allocated for, so you have some R2 there, up in this area, right in here. In that area, you don't have a lot of R2 zones in Post Falls. Most of it is R1. And so this would allow for someone to annex some of these pockets, maybe to request the R2. They could potentially ask for a zone change closer to the city for R2 and make an argument that they'd like to maybe put in some cottage homes closer to town because their lot sizing of the new zoning districts is a little bit smaller. It goes down to 3,000 square feet.
So we're not, we had R2, we're still gonna have R2, but we're
Yep.
changing the criteria for R2.
Yeah, it allows someone to ask for a zone change to R2, which they wouldn't otherwise be allowed to because with the low density residential, we'd be focused to go into, right here you see the RM and it says per focus area. So the way the comp plan is made up, you have your future land use map and you also have these focus areas. So it'd be going to those focus areas and qualitatively looking at each ask. This makes it more of a direct ask if somebody wanted to ask for an R2 zone. They're near some commercial corridor. They may have some smaller lots near them. It may make sense for the Planning and Zoning Commission or Council to approve a zone change. So we're not removing any zoning district, we're just enabling the opportunity for someone to create another public hearing and an ask for it internally to the city that they may not otherwise be allowed to. So we're changing nobody's zones.
And so previously, if they wanted to change their zoning, how is the procedure changing?
The procedures to asking for a zone change isn't changing at all. We have our 6 zone change review criteria. You know, you're looking, is there water? You know, is there sewer? Is it consistent with the comp plan? Is it consistent with the goals and policies in the future land? And this is where this comes in. Is it consistent with the future land use map? That's one of that zone change criteria. So this is the map that you would go to, and you see that light yellow. It says low density residential. So by adding this, allows them for that ask.
Okay, I think I understand what you're saying.
Without the R2 there, there's a likelihood that we would discourage someone to even ask for it, which would prevent potentially some infill development of this nature closer to, let's just say, Mullen Avenue or closer to Spokane Street or closer where there's some commerce that maybe could benefit from this. Someone may own, you know, an acre of land near the city center that they, you know, could do a cottage home product.
Okay, I get it.
Other questions?
So, John, just to clarify, so because the text amendment to the zoning code that was recently passed changed essentially the uses within an R2 zone from apartments to these kinds of residential uses, so townhomes, tiny homes, duplexes, et cetera. It kind of kicked it into a lower density type of development, and so now so this seems more like a housekeeping item where it's, because we got rid of apartments out of R2, now it's kicking it kind of into a low density type of a product, or
Medium to lower.
medium to low, which is more appropriate by comp plan, so now we're allowing it in that, or potentially allowing it in that lower density area on the comp plan, so that instead of just limiting it to the very specific higher density areas. Is that correct? So right now in the comp plan, R2 is just for high density?
Right now, R2 would be allowed in the medium density district and the high density designated areas.
Are we pulling it out of the high density? Or
Because we're still allowing, because some areas with high density, you can still yield potentially some cottage home product at higher densities. And so we're still leaving it in those other areas.
Okay.
We're just adding it as an option here only because it didn't make sense for someone, if they could build an apartment project, would be inconsistent with that low density
Right.
designation. This, on the other hand, someone could ask as part of another public hearing for an R2 and show that nexus to the future land use map and the policies as part of a zone change
Okay.
request.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Other questions? None? Okay. Thank you, sir. As the staff and applicant, do we have anyone wishing to speak in favor?
None.
Any neutral?
None.
Any opposed?
No.
Therefore, there would be no reason to bring Mr. Manley back unless we have other questions for him. No rebuttal necessary. Anything else? Any other questions for staff? No? Going once? Okay. Then I will go ahead and close the hearing and open it up for comment. Anybody want to share?
I'll start. I think this is really important for allowing, or at least providing for opportunity for a lot of diverse housing, especially infill housing. So that huge yellow area on the map is essentially residential. Vast majority of that right now is single-family residential. And obviously, single-family residential is not cheap in Post Falls anymore. So by allowing R2 on the comp plan, or within the comp plan, within the low-density residential designation, that brings a lot of flexibility to the planning. It gives the city a lot of opportunity to be flexible, to allow these little infill things that we wouldn't normally see. And I think that's really, really important. We've got these little donut holes of county and surrounded by Post Falls city, and I think those are, a lot of those may not ever annex into the city without this kind of a comp plan change. So I think it's really important.
Anyone else?
I'm I'm glad to see something that will allow for an easier use of that type of a housing rather than apartments or something, give us more of the middle ground that I think we really need, and to make our citizens a little happier too.
Did I hear you start?
I just think it's going to be, I think it'll be wildly popular, and you're going to get a lot of applicants very quickly.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think so too.
Mr. Stephenson, anything to add?
No, I just think as, housing and planning evolves with the city, making these little tweaks and changes is good for the long run.
I think particularly with those infill pockets that Ray mentioned, I think it's a great opportunity and a good product. So at this point, I would entertain a motion.
I'll try it. I move that we forward to City Council Comp Plan Amendment File Number CPA 0001-2021 with the recommendation to be approval.
Second.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none, call for vote.
Schlauer,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Kimball,
Yes.
Carey,
Yes?
Stephenson.
Yes.
All right. Mr. Manley did not wander far. I guess we'll go ahead and open the second public hearing, Post Falls Landing, Smart Code. Excuse me.
Yes, file number SCA 1, 2021, the landing realty plan amendment. We're the applicant for this. One could question why is the staff applying for an amendment to a regulating plan that's owned by a private party or a different entity. The reason for that is we have individuals interested in properties on this block through time, and the current condition restricts staff's ability to work with applicants in developing that lot. And so it's really gonna, and as I go through it, staff asks for looking at more flexibility in language so we can work with applicants in developing Block D. So the condition 3.32, and I'll show it on the next slide, is placed on this Block D And it's as part of this infill regulating plan that was file number SCA 13-1, Exhibit S1 in your staff report. States that there will be no vehicular access from D or E to West 3rd Avenue or Spokane Street. And there's a reason why this, and I'll go into it, why that language was so specific back in the day. But things have changed since this was placed as part of this approved condition within that regulating plan. So here's block D. I have it highlighted in yellow. North is to the right of the screen. So there's block D. And when this was approved, what you see here, what I say now known as McReynolds, and it's also a public road. This was a private road called Waterside Drive, this portion was. Since that time, this has become a public road. So now this block has 3 public roads that it fronts on, which is a little odd for smart code. Usually with smart code, the way it's developed is you would have in a lot block format, you'd have your primary front, you'd have an alley, then you'd have another set of land, and you have another front. So you have your typical rectangular block with an alley cutting in between, because the way it's developed is you have usually your front setbacks, and then you have rear parking. So it makes development in more of this kind of this curvilinear street pattern, and also working with smart code a bit awkward. So that the current condition would allow us, and I tried to make a depiction of how it could develop. So this being a private drive, you had the 2 fronts, and how smart code's set up is you have you have a layer 1, a layer 2, and then you have a 3rd layer. Parking you'd want in your 3rd layer. So this, as it currently states, you'd have buildings, which I have put mock buildings in the red hatched. You'd front those buildings up on your main frontages with your rear parking, and then that would meet smart code. This, though, does make it a bit awkward, and I cite in your staff report, if this was developed in a building orientation of this nature, and you had all the access come off onto McReynolds, more than likely you'd be encouraging northbound left turn movements off of McReynolds because of the short distance, which would not be the best, as there is a plan for a controlled stop and control device here on 3rd and Spokane, which would be a safer location to have people turning a left turn movement on rather than down here. So the image 1 wouldn't be great at this point in time. Image 2, the way this would work is you could, the way it's stated, come off McReynolds, because once again, it doesn't allow any on 3rd and Spokane, have drive approach and egress go northern or go northbound over to McReynolds again, or go southbound and go this loop. This could work, and it would allow people to come up, and it would, a certain percentage would go to that future stop control intersection here. But like I cited in the staff report, it makes it a bit awkward for delivery trucks and maneuvering, as it creates this tight S-curve to get up to that. You could potentially get someone that want to come in, and they would just proceed further north on McReynolds northbound there. So this is workable. But what staff would propose is an alternative that we can't at this point in time approve a project or look at a project and have the access go straight from the south to the north or from the north to the south, having a centralized parking area at this location with potential buildings fronting on some frontages on 3 fronts. How this is a bit important is smart code does encourage you to have structures fronting its frontages. And so in this layout, you would end up with some structures on 3 public streets, 3 public rights of way, which when this was Waterside Drive in a private street, this was a 3rd layer. So you wouldn't, it was not encouraging structures over here. The current format of it does. And so by doing this, you would lose potentially 3 stalls on 3rd. You get a centralized parking area, which in this format Smart Code also encourages screening, so the structures would provide the screening, and you'd also get some street screening. So in this location, you get better screening of the parking. You would get improved traffic flow. Potentially could yield a higher square footage of structures on the site as well. So the language that staff is proposing isn't just a carte blanche, let's just give access to Third Avenue. It basically is there'd be no vehicle access to Block E. Staff did not see a need to modify that language at this point in time. But for the West Third access on the Third Avenue front Block D may be permitted only through the administrative authorization. So the way Smart Code's set up is anything that has some sort of variance, you could go through this administrative authorization process. So, and in that, there's an intent analysis that you go through. So if you meet the intent of Smart Code, oftentimes you can get approved for this administrative authorization. So staff more or less is proposing that you could get access from D only, but you would go through this administrative authorization process, show that you could still meet the intent of Smart Code, and if you could do that, then it would allow the potential to get access on the third that you can't at this point in time because of that language that's currently out there. So staff's just looking for a vehicle to work with a potential future applicant on Block D. So again, I didn't receive any comments from any agencies on routed. Any questions with the request or why we're looking to amend that regulating plan in that condition?
Any questions?
Parking, oh, go ahead, sorry. Parking spaces you're gonna lose on Third, are they on the north side or south side, do you know?
The parking spaces we would lose would be on the south side of Third, but like I said in the staff report, that more than likely, we would be able to mitigate that and accommodate that offset internally. So we would say, okay, if you were to lose those three, how are you adjusting that on your site as part of that administrative authorization?
Right.
You said estimated 3 spots?
3 spots. When talking with Mr. Paulus, that's what he would deduce that end up losing.
Because there's a stretch of like 5 spots right there on the end, isn't there?
Is the core issue the on-site parking? Trying to allow for on-site parking? Is on-site parking allowed on the rest of these blocks?
The core issue is just, we have individuals that do desire to potentially place a structure at about that location. And they do desire to front some structures on Third and Spokane. It's difficult to work with somebody the way the current condition is. By this, it allows us to go through that intent analysis and allow a development, more flexibility, and get a development down there that we currently aren't getting development.
What flexibility didn't the administrative review process give you that this will?
So right now, we're stuck with image 1 and image 2. Like if someone wanted to put a building at this location, it makes it very difficult to put a building or any sort of square footage on that southwest corner of Block D. So this flexibility allows us to be more creative in different ways rather than making somebody go in and out of McReynolds only. It gives them a second street. We would still consider Spokane Street as that principal main street. So your building would more than likely, vast majority would have to front Spokane Street. Now you have your secondary frontage, which you have 2 in this case. You got Third Avenue and you got McReynolds because of the disposition of it and having so much public streets around it. So that is the quandary staff gets into on the current condition. We didn't have that when it was a private street. Because it was a private street, it was very clear that those were the front layer, the first layer of the development. This was the third layer. So it was not confusing when we originally approved it. You would have only been able to get structures more than likely per image 1 and per image 2 as originally approved. Being a public street, like I've said a few times, has changed the game a little bit.
Okay. Other questions?
I just want to make sure I understand. Third has got an island in it,
Yes, does,
so it'd be right in, right out.
yes.
But that's a roundabout, is that right? Right there at that little roundy circle thing?
Yeah, I basically took an aerial imagery and
Okay.
just traced it.
Okay, so if someone were to come in on Third Street and need to use that, and access onto Third, they would come in from, let's just say, from the freeway, they'd hang a right on Third, go down to the roundabout, kind of flip a U-turn, come back around, and come in.
Yep.
Okay.
And we discussed this with the engineering division, like, is this something that would work? Is this something that you would entertain with a project? This is something that they would entertain, and so, and because of that, we felt like proposing this and moving this forward as an option would work. If there was any sort of health safety type issues with this proposal or decreased functionality, we more than likely wouldn't be proposing it as an option.
Other questions?
No.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Individuals wishing to speak in favor of.
Well, he didn't mark whether he was in favor or not, but he says maybe.
Well, that would lead me to my next question. Anyone neutral? And so right in the middle would be Steve, is it Hyatt? Hyatt?
Like the hotel.
Hyatt.
There you go, Hyatt. Sir, do you wish to speak?
Yeah, just briefly.
Why don't you come up? You can state your name, your address, and you have 4 minutes, sir.
Steve Hyatt, 447 West Waterside Drive, apartment 403, which is actually a condo.
Yes, sir.
And speaking strictly for myself, I looked at this, I read the original plan, which was developed back in 2014, and I personally, I like what they've done here. The reason is, and you don't show it up here, but
I believe Mr. Manley can pull that up for you.
go ahead.
Will that one there work for you?
Yeah, sure, yeah, that's fine.
We'll do that, and I messed it up.
There
we go.
That works. So the reason is our access down to the condos, the older condos, and then the one newer, which are treated somewhat differently, is right here at C, across from the C, up there. And if you think about the development of, commercial buildings up there, and I think there's also in that 2014 plan some, or at least there was in the Spokane Review article, talking about developing over by the water tower as well. So we're going to see a lot more traffic on McReynolds. And this plan seems to reduce the traffic that would be going in or past our driveway. That's all. That's why I personally think it's okay, but, there's a ton of other owners out there. And there was a lot of concern around the mailbox and stuff like that, but my friends Ron and Dee showed up for this, and so we'll see. I don't know if anybody else here is from the landings down there, but anyhow, that's all I got to say.
All right, Mr. Hyatt, thank you very much. Any neutral?
None.
Any opposed? Okay. Mr. Manley, I don't know that there's any reason for continued comment or rebuttal. Mr. Seal,
Nothing
did
to
you
rebut.
you had that eagerness, that look?
He's always eager.
Bob's talk.
Questions for staff? Mr. Melvin is here if we need him for engineering. No? No? No one?
No, sir.
Okay. I'll go ahead and close it unless anybody else has any other questions. Going once, twice, so, okay. Go ahead and close it and open it up for comment. Ray, you started us off. You wanna go two in a row?
Sure. In cases like this, I ask the question, why wouldn't we give them flexibility? Is there a good reason not to? And so is there a good reason not to allow access onto Spokane Street, which is not something they're asking for, but yes, there's a good reason. There's islands there, it's a busy street, just gonna get busier. Now 3rd Avenue, east of Spokane Street's very busy. West of Spokane Street, not busy at all. And so does access onto 3rd, allowing an access onto 3rd in that location make sense? Does it hurt anything? Does it allow for flexibility? Absolutely. It allows for flexibility. Does it hurt anything? No. And so when they have if they have that flexibility to be able to shuffle things around, that allows the creative people on the design side to really come up with something great. When they're hemmed in too much by tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, some of the craziness that seems to, the hard parts of smart code, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It makes it difficult. So I think allowing the flexibility is the right step in getting some good development, some good commercial development down there in a place that's been needing it since the mill went away.
Vicky Joe, James?
I just agree with Ray. I think it's good to have some flexibility with the property that allows better use of the property. And traffic's going to work its way to 3rd anyhow, so why not have the direct access onto 3rd and be done with it?
Yeah, I think as we continue to try to build up that downtown area, anything we can do, make amendments and changes to give that flexibility to get some development in there will be good.
Gentlemen?
Yeah, I think I appreciate the staff being willing to be flexible and work with the people who want to help develop our downtown. That's what most people you talk to, it's important to them. They really want to get some commercial development downtown, have a downtown area. And I think that the smart code ties people's hands a lot of times. And so I'm very happy that they're working with these guys, trying to kick things off here and get that area to finally roll.
Yeah, I think developing that piece is a win-win for everybody, homeowners, city, everybody involved.
Well, I think Ross is exactly correct. I think that there's a lot of pieces of development that can be very controversial, and I'm sure that there's angles to this as well, but the idea of a downtown corridor is something that is very, very much needed, and I think that there is a huge population that agrees with that. So at this point, I would entertain a motion if someone has one they want to bring forth.
I have a quick question for Field. Is this a recommendation for approval or is this an approval?
It is a recommendation for approval.
So this goes to City Council as a recommendation? Okay.
It's a recommendation.
Yeah,
It's a recommendation?
it's a recommendation
Okay.
for approval.
I would move to recommend approval of the Smart Code Landing Regulating Plan Amendment SCA 0001-2021. Not sure if there's a whole lot of findings to make. So, Field, I think I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, and there's not necessarily a
There's
review
no
criteria
right.
to run through.
So I'll just make the motion.
A second.
Got a motion in 2 seconds. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call for a vote.
Stevenson,
Yes.
Carey,
Yes.
Kimball,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Schlauer.
Yes.
Just to be clear, I will draft the recommendation using the deliberations as your findings for the decision.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Administrative and staff reports. Mr. Manley, anything else to add this evening?
There's none.
Okay. Commission comments, anything for the good of the order? I thank you for your time and your commitment. At this point, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.